Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Then and Now. I'm your host, Brandon Hodnett. Today, I'm joined by Lucy Lang from the class of 2003. Lucy studied political science at Swarthmore while playing 4 seasons on the women's lacrosse team. She went on to earn her JD from Columbia Law School and has since worked in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, taught as a lecturer in law, and serves on Swarthmore's Board of Managers. Lucy, thank you for joining me today on Then and Now.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon, and hello to my whole Swarthmore Athletics family. Most a special hello to Karen Borby, one of the great educators in my life and my lacrosse coach.
Lucy, I usually ask alumni in these interviews how they heard about Swarthmore and how they ended up here, but I understand that you have a special connection with Swarthmore that goes way back. Can you tell me about that connection?
Gosh, my grandfather was the son of immigrants and was a busboy in a New York City restaurant when he was in high school, when a wealthy patron took notice of his quick math skills and asked him what his plans were after he graduated from high school. He responded that he didn't know, and the patron brought him a brochure for Swarthmore College. When he brought it home, his mother said, "We could never afford that." And he went back and reported that to the patron, who then said, "I'll take care of it." And so my grandfather went to Swarthmore College thanks to the largesse of a virtual stranger, and from Swarthmore went on to business school to found businesses of his own, and ultimately to provide the same largesse to young people from New York City to encourage them through high school and on to college. After my grandfather completed Swarthmore, 2 of his 3 children went to Swarthmore, including my father. 2 of my father's 4 children attended Swarthmore, including myself. Several cousins have gone to Swarthmore, and countless friends, neighbors, and people who are beloved to my family have been through Swarthmore. So it's very much a part of my core that Swarthmore is a place that is values aligned with my family's values.
That's really neat to hear. What did you study in your time at Swarthmore?
I was a political science major in the honors program, and I minored in history. I did a concentration in interpretation theory, and that interdisciplinary approach to the study of political science has been very much a part of my practice as an attorney and as my career in criminal justice has evolved.
Are there any particular courses or professors that stick out to you as being meaningful to you?
I hate to narrow it down because there are so many professors who had an incredible impact on my thinking. Cindy Halpern was my closest and dearest mentor as a political philosopher and remains a great friend to this day. Professor Carol Nakanoff was my constitutional law professor and helped encourage me on to law school. Keith Reeves, I believe that his first year as a professor was my freshman year, and he has been a friend and thought partner in the development of my current college and prison course that I teach. And Ben Berger, now with the Lang Center, has been a close collaborator on a number of projects related to social justice. So it's hard to narrow it down. And Tim Burke from the history department was a formative part of my education as well. As mentioned, Karen Borby from the athletics department, it was also one of the most important people in my thinking about building community and leadership during my time at Swarthmore and ongoing.
I want to follow up about Coach Karen Borby. Are there any good stories or any good advice that you got from her that's stuck with you since then?
There has been so much advice that I've received from Karen over the years, even as recently as in the past year, that has contributed to my evolution. But what is really remarkable about Karen as an educator and coach is the way in which she models a particular kind of humane leadership.
Mm.
So I was not and am not a strong athlete, but I loved playing on the lacrosse team, and I loved being a member of team sports at Swarthmore. And Karen was always honest and clear with me, but at the same time, kind. And going into my senior year, when it had become clear after 3 years that I was not going to be a star player, she had a candid conversation with me and said, "What do you want out of this experience? I want to make sure that what you want is something that we're able to provide as a team, and that you're able to bring what we need, so that this relationship works both ways." And we had a really full conversation about my hopes and dreams beyond college and how much I was learning from being a member and a leader on that team, and ultimately made the decision that I would play. And I ultimately was the captain my senior year. And it was not because I was an exemplary lacrosse player, but it was because I was so invested in the community, and Karen saw that and fostered that, notwithstanding the fact that it wasn't based on my athletic prowess. So that kind of compassionate, thoughtful leadership has been at the core of how I have come to think about ways in which people can and should lead communities.
Are there any, I mean, it sounds like it was a really good experience through and through. Are there any other like particular really fond memories that you have with teammates or on the field, anything that like, oh, like this really was a special moment for me as a member of the lacrosse team?
There are some special moments that are better locked in a vault of memory amongst the women who I played lacrosse with. But some of the things that stay with me are playing at Muhlenberg in the snow. And it occurred to me several years ago that I have no recollection of what our record was any of the years that I played, nor do I have a recollection of what the score was in a single game that I played in, including that game. But I do have this amazing memory of playing on a snowy turf field and laughing as the snow came down thicker and thicker, and feeling like we were in this incredible surge of youthful energy together. And that's the kind of feeling that I associate with Swarthmore athletics, despite the fact that I have no recollection of the outcomes of any of the games.
Wow, that just seems like a really special memory. So you, if I understand correctly, you're still involved in Swarthmore as a member of the board of managers. Is that correct?
Yes, until COVID, I had the incredible privilege of being on campus at least 4 times a year to serve as a member of the board of managers. And I have really missed being able to enjoy the seasons at Swarthmore through those regular visits.
What's that like? Do you feel like a sense of, I don't know, responsibility, or what? I don't know, what is that experience like, being part of the board of managers and like being able to play a part in the education of students today?
It's such a privilege to serve in a role as a manager, because while ultimately we support the administration in the running of the school, we do have a responsibility to the long-term health and future of the college. And it is a unique and different perspective from what others in the community have, but it gives me and my fellow managers the opportunity to meet with students and professors regularly, to hear about the wonderful things happening on campus, to hear about the conflicts on campus, and to try to think about best ways to resolve them. And of course, to think about how the college fits into the larger social climate and what we are seeking to do by educating the next generation of world leaders.
And so after graduating from Swarthmore, where has life taken you now?
I went directly from Swarthmore to law school, and directly from law school to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, where I served as a prosecutor for many years, handling largely violent crime, including homicides, domestic violence, and street-level gun crime. Towards the end of my time at the District Attorney's Office, I came to feel that there were parts of the system that I didn't understand as much as I might have liked, and tried to think about building a model at the District Attorney's Office to bring people together across difference to try to solve problems. And thinking about the honors seminar experiences that I had at Swarthmore, I imagined an honor style seminar with a group of diverse students involved in the criminal justice system as one way of addressing this tension that I was experiencing. I was familiar with the program that Keith Reeves teaches in local prisons and wondered whether there might be a possibility for bringing together incarcerated students with assistant district attorneys as part of a seminar, in the same way that Professor Reeves brings together Swarthmore students and incarcerated students in his classes. And now a number of other remarkable professors at Swarthmore have done the same. So I piloted at Queensborough Correctional Facility a college level criminal justice seminar in collaboration with the Columbia University Center for Justice. And in that class, we had about 10 students who were incarcerated men and about 10 students who served at all levels of the district attorney's office in Manhattan. And they met weekly over the course of a semester to study the history of criminal justice in America, alternative models for criminal justice, the history of race and racism, and ultimately to jointly author policy ideas, which they presented to the district attorney, the commissioner of corrections, and others. I went on to teach that class in 2 other prisons and to create a set of replication materials that we shared with prosecutors across the country who are interested in undertaking similar kinds of community engagement and legal education models for their office. And that was very much inspired by my own studies at Swarthmore and by the people in the Swarthmore community who have guided me over the years.
In what ways have you seen people really benefiting from these college and prison seminars and courses?
It's highly variable, as with any educational undertaking. People take different pieces of it and they lead people in very different directions. I will share with you a TED Talk by my former student, Jarrell Daniels, who's now a junior at Columbia University, who has spoken beautifully about how the course helped him go on to college and helped model for him a class that he now runs called the Justice Ambassadors, that brings together at-risk youth in New York City alongside city officials in a similar seminar type environment. And Jarrell's work is a real inspiration to me as I think about the needs in criminal justice reform at large. There also have been students who have gone on to other kind of college offerings when they graduated, and there have been students who've gone on just to normal lives that don't involve college afterwards. Folks who've gone on to get jobs. One of my dear students had a beautiful baby boy during COVID. And sadly, there have been students who have not had as much success when they've left prison. It is one of the great tragedies of criminal justice in this country that we don't provide more support to people being released from prison. And I think in particular with great fondness of a student who self-identified as an addict when we met in my class, who left prison and went into the shelter system and told me then that there was tremendous temptation to go back to using in the shelter system, but that he was able to get a job. Unfortunately, when the seasonal job ended, he became depressed, ended up using again, and heartbreakingly overdosed. in the shelter system. And, you know, it's stories like that that compel me to work in criminal justice and try to reimagine a better system that serves people once they've left prison, and the kind of inclusive community that I experienced at Swarthmore. And I know that that people's experiences at Swarthmore have been highly variable, like at any community, but that is very much the model that I could imagine a community adopting to try to help people succeed.
In what ways can the criminal justice system, be infused with dignity? And I think that, I saw that word dignity on your website, and just different ways that, different things that you've been a part of to bring dignity into all aspects of people touched by the criminal justice system.
There are some big picture answers to that, like creating alternatives to incarceration that are needs-based, that assess what someone needs who has committed a harm, that assesses what the victim needs and wants in terms of repair or restoration for the harm they've experienced, and the development of pathways to provide resources to everyone affected by a crime. And then there are some, and that requires that people be treated with dignity. One important facet to dignity to me comes from the parts of my education that were rooted in Quakerism. And the notion of seeing the inner light in every person is very much at the foundation of how I think about what we should be looking for in making decisions around criminal justice policy. And to that end, there's also a kind of micro set of answers to your question. And I think about things as simple as the layout of the courtroom and the language that's used, that a courtroom has a judge who sits up high on a bench wearing a black robe, and the person who's charged with the crime and the prosecutor stand side by side and never look one another in the eye. And that very format makes it difficult to see the inner light of the person who's been charged. In courtrooms, prosecutors are trained to call people defendant, which is the name for the posture that they're in the case. Human-centric language, like calling someone Mr. Hodnett instead of defendant, is much more likely to result in the people around them seeing them as a full person instead of as a number or a case to be processed. So I think that we need to work on both the macro level system changes and on the micro level cultural changes in order to achieve transformation in criminal justice.
Wow. Lucy, I just have a couple more questions for you if you have time. I noticed on your website that you're also the author of a children's book with your sister. Can you tell us what that book is about and what it was like working with your sister on that project?
My sister is a fine artist and arts educator, and we had long talked about the possibility of doing some kind of project together, but nothing ever seemed to kind of obviously gel, my work as a lawyer and her work as a fine artist, until we realized that the centennial of the 19th Amendment was coming this past summer in August. And we visited the archives at the Museum of the City of New York and saw images from the iconic 1915 Women's March down Fifth Avenue, which preceded the New York State allowing women to vote, and ultimately the 19th Amendment. And of course, there are an incredible set of complicating factors around this. It was not until the Voting Rights Act that people of color were categorically protected. Indigenous people were not given the right to vote until decades later. So I don't mean to suggest that the passage of the 19th Amendment was a complete victory, but it was a major turning point in the history of voting rights in America, and one that we wanted to acknowledge. we also really saw resonance between the 1915 march and the current women's marches. And my own daughter, who's 4 right now, was asking questions about seeing women in the streets. We were bringing her to marches and trying to explain in child-appropriate terms about what marching accomplishes. So the book was written in rhyme for young children in an effort to use language that is comprehensible to them, that draws on the history and iconography of the tradition of marching in the women's movement, and also places it in a contemporary context.
And the title of that book was what again?
It's called March On, and you can visit marchonny.com to learn more about it, and for downloadable coloring pages and age-appropriate discussion questions for children.
Very neat. Lucy, we're getting to the end of the interview here, and I always like to end by asking if you have any teammates, classmates, or anybody else that you'd like to give a shout out to in this video.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Again, I would hate to exclude anyone. So much love to the women I played lacrosse with from the fall of 2003 until, rather, the fall of 1999 until the spring of 2003. And gosh, particular love to Kimmy Jo Cariello and Mariam Levy and Katie Clunan and Kate Nelson Lee. I mean, I could just name so many. Sam Usla and Jackie Kahn. There were so many wonderful women who I played with and think of and inform the way I think about being a leader and a community member. And they're just really inspiring. It's an honor to be a member of the Swarthmore community in an ongoing way. And Swarthmore Athletics is very much a part of my identity. So thank you for all that you do to maintain that and make it possible for this generation and future generations of athletes at Swarthmore.